Leaders need to learn how to stop doing stuff. Yesterday's relevance is probably today's irrelevance, and we need to act on that. Look, I had a concept which I called cleanse the inside, and it was all oriented to improving internal viscosity. It would go at things like dumb rules that made no sense to customers, just did nothing but annoy them. They were there for some unbelievable or unknown reason, and yet they still sit there pissing people off. So getting rid of that stuff, cutting the grunge.
Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Hey, I'd love to get to know you and chat with you and answer your questions. So we are going to do live Q&As every month on the second Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can register for the Q&A on the Eventbrite link that is in the show notes. We hope to see you and chat with you. Today, we're going to chat about the fundamentals that need to be in place to grow to $1 billion with someone who's actually done it in their business. This is not theory. This is reality and what needs to happen. And many of the steps we talk about, and here we're going to tie them all together. In addition, we'll chat about how to be different so you can achieve premium pricing and compete in a blue ocean as a distinct and different than any other. Think about it. How many other Profit Answer Mans do you know? How many other chief profitability advisors do you know? Just me. I'm one of the only, and it was done on purpose. Roy Osing is a guy who took a startup to $1 billion in annual sales. He is the only author, entrepreneur, and executive leader who delivers practical and proven, audacious, unheard-of ways to produce high-performing businesses and successful careers. Roy is a former president, CMO, and entrepreneur with over 40 years of successful and unmatched executive leadership experience in every aspect of business. As president of a major data and internet company, his leadership and audacious, unheard-of ways took the company from its early stage to $1 billion in annual sales. He's a blogger, content monitor, and mentor to young professionals. As an accomplished business advisor, he is author of the no-nonsense book series, Be Different or Be Dead. With the Audacious Unheard-of Ways, I took a startup to $1 billion in sales as his 7th book. Let's meet Roy and learn from him. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Roy Osing. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Excited to learn from you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your current business?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in business for over 40 years, working first of all as an executive in a telco. Seems like a long time ago when it was a monopoly, and having the opportunity to take a startup internet business and build it into $1 billion a year, which was an incredible ride. Gives me goosebumps when I think about it. And so I left work after several years and decided that I would work with businesses and young professionals, startup companies, helping them basically grow their businesses and be successful on the things that work for me. So I'm a practical guy. I understand theory, but what worked for me wasn't theory. What worked for me was doing stuff that lit fires in people, practical things that could actually be achieved, executing things rather than pondering about them and examining their theoretical pristineness. So I'm a doer. And so my work is all about how to be different, how to differentiate yourself, how to get things done in business in a real world full of bias, all of that sort of thing. And I've been helping companies do it for the last several years, and I'm just having a blast.
It's always good to have fun in business because that's the way it's supposed to be. And just from our conversation, you don't work hard. Let's get that out on the table.
Well, I try not to.
Yeah.
It's my raison d'etre, but sometimes I fall off my plank and I end up working too hard. And my wife reminds me.
Well, that's good. But I think that's the thing. I think business owners first have to understand you don't necessarily need to work hard. That's not a badge of honor, right? If we're good business owners, we work less and less.
Well, you have to work on the right things. If you get that right, then it takes a little bit of the pressure off working 27 hours a week or a day. But at the end of the day, you know what? Pain is indeed a strategic concept. I learned that a long time ago, and pain comes from busting the gut. And so, yeah, I've always had to do that. I've never been one of these guys fortunate enough to let things ride and deliver superlative results. I've had to work at it. And that's just who I am. And I think that's something, quite frankly, Rocky, that's missing today. I don't think people work hard enough. I'll be perfectly honest with you. They rely on proven practices in the past, and some CEOs just assume they can dump a new strategy on an organization and it miraculously happens. It never happens, okay? And so if you're not getting dirty every day as a leader, you're not doing your job. So I would kind of define that as working hard. I had to work really hard, man. I had to work really hard to get done. You don't get to $1 billion by taking a lot of time off.
No, I can believe that. So tell us, where did you start and how did you get from there to the $1 billion?
Yeah, so it was a time of incredible change going through the communications business. And if you go back in time, the internet was just coming on. So the challenge we had was here comes an amazingly high potential market in the data and internet space with incredible competition, with an organization that, quite frankly, was built yesterday. It was a voice organization. It had a voice culture. It wasn't a data organization. It didn't have an internet culture. So I was asked to take on the responsibility of actually getting us into that internet world and creating economic value from it. And the biggest challenge, of course, was to try and figure out how to move the ship, how to morph ourselves, how to create a new culture, new skill sets, and new competencies that would make us successful in that world. And so I'm a real simple guy. And so what I did is I went basically with a clean sheet. I said, whatever we've been doing up to now, good. It worked fine. I'm going to assume it's irrelevant on a going forward basis. So we're going to start out with that. And we're going to create data-centric, internet-centric cultural relevance for ourselves. And that was the journey. That was the way we started to build essentially a new machine. And so we had to re-examine literally everything that we did and break away from most of it. Okay, because what worked in the old world would never work in the new world. And I think that's proven itself out time and time again. In fact, I don't think we're giving up enough these days as leaders. We're not walking away from yesterday's relevance enough these days. But the journey basically was to do simple stuff that aided execution, creating a strategy that was really simple and lighting fires in people and getting them to believe and just working it. And we did some cool things along the way that a lot of people never did. Like, for example, we cut the crap. Now, Cut the Crap was an interesting program because what it basically said is we got a whole bunch of garbage going on inside the machine that was restricting viscosity. In other words, it wasn't aiding and abetting execution. Like, I'm an execution guy. If I can't do it, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't care how theoretically pristine it is, Rocky. I don't. If I can't do it, if it doesn't drive performance, I don't want to talk about it. And so one of the things we did is we said, look, we got a lot of grunge, as Tom Peters would say, in the organization that's really gumming it up. So we had a cut the crap thing. And we had competitions. Who could cut the most crap? Liberating for people that could actually do what they've always known was a fact. Like, there's too much bureaucracy, too much crap going on, right? And so I would show up in the workplace with my white t-shirt with cut the crap on it and everything. Everybody would say, oh, here comes Roy. He wants to cut in the crap. So we had competitions. We had a lot of fun. But what it did is it loosened us up and enabled us to execute better. And with that came ever increasing levels of performance, which over time got us to where we got to. So we did a lot of that sort of thing. There wasn't any silver bullets here, right? There wasn't any sort of academic brilliant moves. No, it wasn't that. It was practical, simple things that people knew were right, that they could believe in, that they executed on day in and day out. And my job was to help them. I was a leader that served around. I just helped them. How can I help? And we just kept doing it. Pretty boring, pretty dull.
And it's funny because I tell business owners, your frontline workers, they know what to do if you give them the freedom. And you create an atmosphere where it's not, oh, this is how we do it. It's an atmosphere of how do we get this done as quick and as fast as possible? And how do we eliminate, like, it's a simple 80-20 rule, right? 20% provides 80% of the value, which means 40% provides 96% of the value, which means 60% is gunk that literally provides very little value. So how do we get rid of that? How do you create systems to be able to do that? And I think a lot of times business owners go the opposite direction. Something goes wrong, and then they put all these policies and procedures in place to make sure it never happens again, which literally gunks up the entire system instead of just working through it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, business value, unfortunately, gets identified with doing new things all the time. And the reality is, my experience is exactly the opposite. There's a ton of business value that comes about from stop doing things. In fact, leaders need to learn how to stop doing stuff. Yesterday's relevance is probably today's irrelevance, and we need to act on that. Look, I had a concept which I called cleanse the inside. And it was all oriented to improving internal viscosity. That's the way I called it. And so it would go at things like dumb rules that made no sense. You just alluded to it, make no sense to customers, just did nothing but annoy them. They were there for some unbelievable or unknown reason, and yet they still sit there pissing people off. So we had contests, getting rid of that stuff, cutting the grunge, simple little things that people believed in that had an amazing impact on the ability of the machine to execute the strategy at the end of the day. And that's what we were supposed to be doing, right? So you help people. Frontline people I spent probably half my week with frontline people. I was one of them. I wasn't the president of the company. I was Roy, who was there to help. And I think we need more of that. It just doesn't happen enough, in my view.
How do you light fires in people? Because the number one issue that I hear about is people. It's one of the top things. We can't find people. People don't want to work. More often than not, I think they haven't created a good culture that brings people in that want to do what you want them to do. But how do we light fires in people?
Well, I think one of the things, at least that worked for me, was creating the right strategic context for people. Like it's almost like you need a description, a strategy within which you can now have a conversation about what people's roles are. Okay. It's not a matter of exciting them, right? It's a matter of exciting them to do the right things, right? And so if you have a clear strategy, and I call it line of sight leadership, I mean, articulating for every individual what their role is in executing the strategy and what they need to stop doing. Like organizational dysfunction happens for one simple reason. Everybody's doing their own thing and nobody understands the strategy. So sales is doing one thing, marketing's doing another thing, right? The way to get rid of that is you need to make sure that you define everybody's line of sight. And it's extremely arduous to do. I mean, it really is, right? Because it goes right down to the people in accounting, right? They need to understand their role. So it sort of starts with that. And then it goes at, okay, what's in the way from you doing that role that we just agreed was necessary for you to do in order to execute the strategy? And how can I help? All it needs, okay, all you need to do is be viewed as somebody that can deliver results to make it easy for people to do their job. And all of a sudden, the pupils dilate. They believe the strategy. They love their job. Employee engagement goes up and execution happens. So it doesn't start out with, let's light a fire. It starts out with, do they understand the strategy? Does it make sense to them? Hold me accountable for explaining. Do they get it? Do they have the tools? Do they know what to do, what their role is? And how can I help them do it? Over time, that results in passion and fire in the belly. And then you have some fun along the way with programs like, let's cut the crap. Let's kill dumb rules. Let's hire for goosebumps. Let's do all of these crazy things that Roy talks about, because all that does is add enjoyment around the periphery. And it just goes. And by the way, it's infectious. When people see their coworkers getting excited about a dumb rule that they've been successful in getting rid of and been rewarded for, they go, okay, I want a piece of that. And it's like, it's like COVID on steroids doing the right thing.
You said you have to work on the right things. How do you decide as a leader what the right things to work on are?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I was asked to take on this job of growing this young, small business, I looked around for things that could help me do that. And the first thing I landed on is we needed a strategy. We needed a firm strategy that we could actually leverage. And I found that the pedantics of the consulting business of the day couldn't help me. And the reason for that was they were more concerned about what to do as opposed to how to do it. And I needed help on how to do it, right? Not something that was theoretically perfect that couldn't be executed. I wasn't interested in that. And so what I ended up doing is building my own strategy process. And I call it my strategic game plan. The whole reason behind it is it was a concept, a methodology that was built to execute. Because again, going back, my view has always been spend as little a time as you can on the strategy. A lot of this will upset a lot of people. And most of the time on how to execute it, learn from executing it and adjusting it as you go. Because in a world that's imperfect and imprecise, how can you possibly expect to be precise? I mean, it's a ridiculous notion. So I figured that out a long time ago. So I built a process that said we can build a strategic game plan in actually 48 hours by answering 3 questions. And I've done this with clients and I did it with myself. First question, how big do you want to be? Okay, so this is a question about your growth goals. And it says in 24 months, not 5 years, because the 5th year never ever shows up in a planning process. It never shows up. You know that. Short term, in order to accommodate unanticipated events, you have to have a short-term horizon and earn the right to get to the 5th year. And so we'd say, all right, how big do you want to be in 24 months? If you're at 5 million a year on top line revenue, do you want to be at 10? Do you want to be at 15? The reason the number makes sense, first of all, is it drives the character and the risk profile of your strategy. See, most strategy building processes answer the economic question at the end, right? And I figured, no, that's wrong because nobody likes the numbers. They don't change they change the assumptions and don't change the strategy, which is nonsensical. So answer, how big do you want to be? And it's all about top line. It's not about net income. It's not about profits. It's not about EBITDA. It's about market expression, which is top line. Second question is really simple. Where are you going to get the money? Where are you going to get it? Okay. So that's a matter of which customer groups have the latent potential to deliver your how big. It's not a mass market game, as you know. It's like segmentation. Figure out the customer groups that can actually deliver it to you. And then the third question says, okay, in those customer groups, not the mass market, how are you going to compete and win, given that there's competition? And that particular question leads you to the differentiation challenge, because you're going to win by being the only one that does what you do, not by being better, not by providing exceedingly great customer service, not by being the number one provider, not by being the market leader. You're going to win by being the only one that does what you do. And that leads us into an exercise around creating an only statement, which is something that I had to create myself as well.
So I'm going to take issue with this. You tell me, because one of the biggest problems we have is everyone chases after top line sales, which to us is a vanity number. It's wonderful that you got to X amount of money. But at the end of the day, we need profit and cash flow. And so where does that come in?
Yeah. So I'm just starting, right?
Okay.
Because the SGP process starts with revenue because it's an expression of what the market feels about you. Okay. EBITDA doesn't do that. It's insipid. Net income doesn't do that because I can give you whatever net income you want. Okay. Because I know the income statement. We go through the process and we have a strategic game plan statement. Then we slip down to objectives. Okay. And so it would go like this, right? Go after top line, differentiate yourself, and then manage costs. Okay. So what I did is I worked out my own little formula that basically is based on the sort of revenue minus cost equal profit. My formula wasn't that at all. It was revenue minus profit equals cost. So the cost envelope is driven by whatever's left over. That's why top line is so important. It's not a vision. Top line is not a vision, right? It's a declaration, okay, of intent. And you're going to do everything you can to get it. You know, what you're going to do is say, all right, what's your reasonable return on that? Whatever you have left, dude, is all you got to run the business. And if you can't, you have two choices, right? You either re-engineer and get your costs down, or you figure that you need a new plan. You don't have any other choice. So yeah, cost is exceedingly important, but it's not the lead. It's the end in my world.
So just for all of you listening, Roy has not read Profit First. He doesn't know about the book. All right. But he gave you the same exact equation that we use, which is sales minus profit equals expenses. And so this is a proven formula. And here
that was a trick question. That was a trick question. You set me up, Rob.
I didn't set you up. I didn't know if you read the book or not. You're the only other person who's ever come to me with that formula, except those that have read the book. I mean, it's the way I built my life. Like, you know,
Me too. That's the way. That was essential in my kit bag to get to the billion. Because it wasn't a billion with no margin. Let me tell you, it was a billion with a lot of margin. And I would hand off cost envelope targets to my vice presidents in their performance plan. And I said, okay, here's your revenue and here's your cost. You just need to tell me whether you're up for it or not. That's when they realize that pain is a strategic concept.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, good question. It's like this journey of focusing on differentiation and targeting your efforts at what people crave, not what they need. And all of this is a very arduous, it's a very difficult situation that people fight against because it's different. It's not the usual traditional way of growing a business. And in my life, I had so many issues with people just kind of like fighting it all the way. And so it was like push and rope. And that requires a lot of pain tolerance. Because if you're not up for it, don't even try the journey because you'll never make it successful. So if you don't have that incessant drive to constantly to move towards the goals that you've set, it doesn't work. And so, yeah, pain is strategic. Not many people talk about it, but it is. Because if you can't tolerate it, you're not going to be successful. You just won't.
So how do you weed people out, or do they weed themselves out?
Well, it depends on how you set up the whole process of performance planning. I was, as you probably can get already, I was pretty hard when it came to performance because I was hard on getting results. And so there was a lot of self-selection out, to be honest, where people said, you know what? This isn't for me. And I said, fine, I'm okay with that. Let's agree that it's not a good fit. Okay. And move on. And so a big part of my recruitment was around, can you tolerate pain? And people would look at me and go, what do you mean, Roy? Of course I can tolerate pain. Then of course, another 25 questions proved that they couldn't, but at least, I got that integrated into the recruitment process. I wanted to find out what was inside people's guts. I was less concerned about what they knew. Like, I'm a guy that I can teach you the business. What I can't teach you is how to tolerate pain and how to love human beings. Because if you don't love human beings, we're going to have a teamwork issue, and probably I'm going to have a customer service problem. Okay. And so I spent a lot of time. That's where I got hiring for Goosebumps, because I used to hire people who gave me goosebumps, just because loving human beings is about customer service and creating memorable experiences. And if you didn't like human beings, I don't want you in my organization. Go get a job coding somewhere. And so, yeah, it was just like, and I refined it as we went. I learned it as we went. But yeah, a lot of people just went, not for me. You have to respect that. You have to support them as they leave. And you have to have an image of the kind of individual that you want that's consistent with the organization's strategy. And if you say that we're going to differentiate ourselves along the lines of customer service, which a lot do, but they don't take it deep enough in terms of creating the granularity, then you have to have a recruitment process that allows you to expose that in people so you can look inside them as much as you can and take a bet on the one that is more feelings oriented than regurgitation of a textbook.
So you're hiring to your culture, not necessarily to the skills needed for the job, because it's not hard to teach skills. It's really hard to teach values and culture into
Absolutely
people.
Right. Absolutely right. And we spent, oh my goodness, once we had the strategy of the business as well defined as we could, recognizing that it obviously will change, and it did change with changes in the market, you have to then say, all right, what culture do we need to deliver that strategy? And how do we want people to interact, and what specific competencies do we want? And hire them into that and provide them with the tools and support that they need. And even then, as you know, you're going to make, mistakes. But for the most part, that's just the way it is. For the most part, you get a nucleus, and then that just starts to build on itself, right? It's organic, and it's amazing to see the results of that.
What were the questions you asked that allowed you to discern that about people?
Well, one of my favorites, there was a whole litany. First of all, the process I used, we did, the classic panel interviews. The difference was I sat on most of the panels. So you had the president of the company with the sales team, and we'd be interviewing for sales positions. And the reason I wanted to be involved in that, some people would say, yeah, Roy, that's micromanaging. And I would go, thank you. Yes, it is. Because it's important, right? It drives me crazy when leaders delegate everything as abdication. Okay, I believe in strategic micromanagement. In other words, the things that were essential to the strategy execution, Roy got involved in. Okay. So hiring was one of those things. So I wanted to be there to show, first of all, how important it was that we were hiring, say, in this example, a salesperson. But then secondly, the sales team to also get the message how important it was, and to see the kind of questions that I asked. And hopefully they would get it and they would decide it was reasonable. So one of the questions I would say is, Rocky, do you like human beings? Now, what you would typically do is kind of like lean back and go, wow, I've never been asked that one before. I wonder where this is going. But I think the answer should be yes. So you would say, yeah, Roy, of course I like human beings. So my follow-up question would be, okay, tell me a story. I want you to tell me a story, okay, that would demonstrate for me in living color how much you love human beings. Now, this was the question that separated people, because the people who were just playing a mind game with me, they would tell me a phony story that was like useless and it would leave me like cold like a fish. But the people who had caring for others running through their veins as part of their DNA, they would tell me a story that was rich and deep with passion. You could just sense and feel the caring. I'd hire that person because they gave me goosebumps. In fact, just talking about it gives me goosebumps. A lot of people think that's a crazy indicator. And I say, no, it's not, right? Because business is based on relationships and engagement. It's not based on formulas, for God's sake. Never has been, never is, right? People buy on emotion. They don't buy because you got a formula driving your business. And so I use that as kind of like a guidance, of a guiding light. And so the hiring for Goosebumps was very successful because after a while, talking about self-selection, we had people going, geez, maybe I'm not fit in for this job. Like we'd be putting people in customer service positions, okay, with seniority. This was in the union environment, right? Who actually had no skills. They didn't want to do the job, right? And they couldn't even give me one goosebump. So forget that. But that was an example of a silly little thing that I used that ended up, I think, to be very effective.
And I think that's one of the issues. People hire people that are similar to them and that they like, not necessarily people who will get the job done and do it well. And I think this is why most of corporate America is a disaster, is because of that.
I agree with you 100%. The other thing that I was fortunate to have done was this whole notion of line of sight. So when I was looking at a prospective candidate for any function, I knew what their role had to be to deliver to the strategy because we had already done that work. Okay. So the questioning about attitudes and inclination and competencies would all be within that context. It wasn't like, okay, are you good at conflict management? You kidding me? It was much more specific. It was, okay, we have a strategic imperative that says we're going to create experiences for our customers that takes their breath away. Tell me a story about you taking a breath away from a colleague or an associate or a family member. Tell me a story. See, so you get the feeling and emotional piece in the question, but the question is anything but non-strategic. It is so pointed, right? I want people that can create experiences. Tell me a story when you've done it. And so out comes the emotion, right? If it comes out as an academic treatise, okay, on Psychology 101, then I show them the door. But that's not what I want. I don't want that. So that's the sort of life we tried to build, you see. And I hope the point I'm making is we weren't doing this just because it was fun to do. We were doing it because it was directly related to the strategy of the organization to build the business as rapidly as we could. And feelings and passion, okay, in relationships, in my opinion, were essential to that. And we built a business around that. Simple stuff.
What are the biggest mistakes you see small business owners making today?
Yeah, differentiation is a huge one for me. Like I deal with CEOs of startups, and small, because I'm doing some of that as well. They're already going. And when I ask them, what makes you special? They stumble on that. It's really hard. They say, well, we provide good customer service. So I said, okay, the guy down the street says the same thing. Now tell me what makes you special. Well, we've been in business for 57 years. Okay, the guy down the street's been in business 116. So I keep working this. There's not enough. And I get that small businesses and startup guys, they're under pressure. It's important to take a step back though. Like I say to startups, if you haven't figured out how you're different, stop spending money to the point you said earlier, okay, about not getting rid of things that are unproductive. I go further than that. say, take a step back and let's figure out what makes you special. Why should a customer do business with you and not your competitor? You need to answer that question for yourself in granularity. And of course, that drives the agenda that I have towards creating an only statement, which has been so powerful, a tool to use in differentiation, that I'm convinced that if people are not doing it, they're gonna have difficulty. Okay, basically carving out a unique position in the market. So that's it. They need to spend time figuring it out up front.
I like it, and I like the get different. I mean, that's Mike's other book, which we talked about before, is being different. And that is where you get to be unique. And that's where you get the power of pricing and so forth. And it is about customer service and so forth. And that's one of our core things with our clients is we get them answers quickly because business moves fast. And we want to make sure that we're there before the final decision's made because it's a lot harder to clean up the mess after the fact. And unfortunately, most people, when they call their finance accountant person, it's weeks before they get an answer. And that we try and get answers same day so that business owners can make decisions quickly and continue to move forward.
I think the other thing that would occur to me is that in my experience working with small business, they are typically tactically driven. Okay, because it's like in the heat of the moment in action, trying to drag them back a little bit. And that's one of the powers of this process I created, because it literally, you can't give me 48 hours to help you develop a future for your business. I mean, really, I get that if it was like a classic McKinsey thing, pay me $1 million and I'll give you a strategy in 16 months kind of stuff. Love you, McKinsey. Anyways, not my bag of tea, but that's the other thing, is trying to help them understand a strategy piece doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it has to be done because that informs differentiation. You get those two pieces done, your life will be a lot easier, right? Your recruitment will be a lot more effective because you'll know what you're looking for. So it all kind of create that cloud of strategy and go from there. My success rate in that is kind of, as you know, it's always hit and miss, right? It's like herding cats.
I've always said when you know where you're going, it's much easier to get there.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's absolutely what you talk about. Be clear. And that's the other thing that we do with our clients is we also ask about them as the person. What do they want out of life? Because a lot of times we find there's a mismatch between what they say they want and what their business is doing. And so we got to bring them into alignment. And that just takes time. And we get
That's
there.
a great point. It's a great point. I mean, mismatches happen at all levels and areas in an organization, including the owners. And it's rarely dealt with, to be honest. So good for you.
That's where we start. Literally, like we begin with the owner, because if the owner is not grounded and in good, solid position and clear on what they want and where they're going, they tend to chase shiny objects, and then it's hard to hold them down. So it works.
I call it chasing yummy. So my phrase for that is yummy incoming. It's good. This looks really good. Let's go chase that. Let's go chase.
And now chasing. You've written 7 books. If people would like to learn about you, your books, where can they find you? Where can they learn more?
So I have a website, bedifferentorbedead.com. You can go there. I've tried to make it robust as I can in terms of resources. My books are on there. I blog every week. And I've done that since 2009 when I wrote my first book, Be Different or Be Dead, Your Business Survival Guide. And again, that was the beginning of kind of like sharing specific practical ideas and how-to notions around the subject. And so there's a lot of content around my work there. But you know what? I'm available on email. My email address is roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm really happy to have conversations with individuals about, for example, there's a lot of people that will draft up their only statement to differentiate themselves. And they'll send me an email and say, hey, Roy, what does this look like? How's this? And so we have an opportunity to engage, and they go away with something that I'm proud of. And it's contributing to clarity in what makes you special. And so, there's several, and I'm on social media, all the normal stuff. Instagram as at Unheard of Ways. The rest is Roy Osing.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today. That's so funny. Roy didn't know the formula we use for profit first, but yet he knew it. It's the way he did business. It works, and it will work when you get to $1 billion in sales. And it will work today, and it works at startup. And at the end of the day, you will be immensely profitable then, unlike, say, Uber. These principles work in every business at every size. You need clarity on where you're going and the culture you want. Then hire to that and get rid of all the friction that's making getting stuff done hard. Let's make business easy so we can enjoy the ride and be profitable, because you don't need more resources. You need to be more resourceful. Remember to focus on the bottom line.
If you'd like for us to be a part of your profitability journey, we have different programs available ranging from do-it-yourself to one-on-one coaching. Our course, The Profit Blueprint, teaches you everything you need to know to transform your profitability. There are 3 different tiers ranging from DIY to done with you so that businesses of all sizes can get the support that's best. Join the waitlist in the show notes to get more information and be a part of the next cohort. If you want a done-for-you service, you can hire us as your Chief Profitability Officers. We only work with a handful of clients, so they all get our full attention. We work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $10 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on our calendar for a good fit conversation to see if we're the right people to support you and how we can help you.
This episode of the Profit Answer Man podcast is brought to you by SMBpodcastnetwork.com. The network is a collection of podcasts and shows from around the internet which focus on bringing you interviews with amazing guests who share actionable advice, ideas, and information for small and medium-sized business owners and entrepreneurs. Visit www.smbpodcastnetwork.com to find more great shows and easily subscribe to be notified of new episodes. It's a great way to discover quality content. If you've discovered us via the network, then I hope you enjoy today's show and will consider subscribing directly so you never miss our episodes. Remember to check out my other podcast, Richer Soul, where we talk about how to live the ultimate life and be the best business owner you can be. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.